My son screamed, "Stop living off me." I rewrote my will, and he was horrified for life stories. My name is Vincent, 62 years old, and I never thought my only son would turn against me. After dedicating my entire life to raising Jason alone, his words cut deeper than any knife. "Stop living off me," he screamed in my face. Those 5 words erased decades of sacrifice. That night, I walked away from his mansion with nothing but my dignity. Rewriting my will was not about revenge, but reclaiming my self-worth. Before I tell you how my own son turned against me, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like button if you have ever felt betrayed by someone you gave everything to. Life has a way of testing your strength when you least expect it. For me, that test began when my beloved wife Sarah passed away from cancer, leaving me alone with our 5-year-old son Jason. The memory of her final days still haunts me, but what hurt more was seeing the confusion in our little boy's eyes as he tried to understand why Mommy was never coming home. I made a promise at Sarah's grave that I would give Jason everything she would have wanted for him. And for nearly 30 years, I kept that promise no matter the cost. In those early days, grief was a luxury I could not afford. I took on 2, sometimes 3 jobs simultaneously. During the day, I worked as a carpenter at a construction company, then nights as a security guard at the local mall. Weekends were spent doing odd repair jobs around the neighborhood. Sleep became a rare commodity, but every time I saw Jason's face, I found renewed energy. Our modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs was nothing special, but I made sure it was always filled with love. The kitchen table became our sacred space where we would eat dinner together every night, no matter how exhausted I was. It was there that Jason would excitedly tell me about school, his friends, and his dreams. "Dad, when I grow up, I want to be rich, so you never have to work again," he once told me over a simple meal of spaghetti, his favorite. I smiled, ruffling his hair. "Just focus on being happy, buddy. That is all I need." Every penny I earned that did not go toward our immediate needs was saved for Jason's future. I opened a college fund when he was 6, contributing whatever I could, even if it meant wearing the same pair of work boots until they fell apart, or skipping lunch to save a few dollars. Those years were not all hardship, though. We had our moments of pure joy. Teaching Jason to ride his bike in the park camping trips in the summer, where we would fish and tell ghost stories by the fire, and our annual Christmas tradition of making wooden ornaments together in my small workshop in the garage. Jason was a bright child, consistently bringing home excellent grades. His teachers praised his intelligence and ambition, but I also noticed early on that he was never quite satisfied with what he had. When he was 10, he wanted the most expensive sneakers on the market because all the cool kids have them. At 14, it was the latest gaming console. By 16, he was asking for a car, not just any car, but something that would impress his classmates. I tried my best to provide, often working overtime or selling some of my tools to fulfill his wishes. Perhaps that was my first mistake, placing his wants above my needs. But is that not what parents do? Sacrifice for their children. The pivotal moment came during Jason's senior year of high school. He had been accepted to an Ivy League university, his dream school. The scholarship he received covered only a portion of the astronomical tuition. The remainder would deplete not only his college fund, but also most of my savings. "You should consider the state university," I suggested gently. "They offered you a full scholarship, and their business program is excellent." The look of disappointment on his face broke my heart. "Dad, this is my future we are talking about. All my friends are going to top schools. I need the connections from an Ivy League if I want to succeed in finance." After a sleepless night weighing our options, I made the decision that would forever alter our relationship, though I did not know it then. I sold our family home, the home where Jason took his first steps, where Sarah and I had built our life together. The proceeds, combined with his college fund, would be enough to send him to his dream school without loans. We moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment closer to the city. Jason was thrilled about his acceptance, too excited about his future to notice the sacrifice behind it. The day I dropped him off at college, watching him walk confidently toward his dorm building, I felt both immense pride and a strange sense of foreboding. The chapter of raising my boy was ending, but I never imagined the next one would be so painful. 4 years passed in the blink of an eye. Jason graduated with honors, his business degree opening doors I could have only dreamed of at his age. I sat in the audience during his graduation ceremony, my chest swelling with pride as he crossed the stage in his cap and gown. All those years of hard work, all those sacrifices had paid off. My son was going to have opportunities I never had. The investment bank that recruited him offered a starting salary that made my lifetime earnings look modest in comparison. Within months, Jason was renting a luxury apartment in the financial district, wearing tailored suits and talking about markets and portfolios with confidence that impressed even his superiors. Meanwhile, I continued living in our modest apartment, now working solely as a foreman at the construction company where I had spent most of my career. My body was beginning to protest the physical demands of the job, but retirement was not an option yet. The sale of our home and Jason's education had depleted most of my savings. Our Sunday dinners, once a sacred tradition, became less frequent as Jason's schedule grew more demanding. When we did meet, I noticed subtle changes in his demeanor. The way he checked his watch during our conversations, the slight wince when I mentioned my work, the new habit of name-dropping executives and celebrities he had met at company events. "Dad, you should really consider upgrading your phone," he said during one dinner, eyeing my 5-year-old flip phone with disdain. "I can hardly text you on that thing." "This one still works fine," I replied, patting the phone affectionately. "No need to spend money on something new when the old one does the job." He rolled his eyes slightly, a gesture that stung more than he knew. It was around this time that Jason met Melissa at a charity gala his firm had sponsored. She came from old money, her family name attached to buildings and foundations throughout the city. She was beautiful, sophisticated, and ambitious, a perfect match for the man Jason was becoming. The first time I met her was at an upscale restaurant Jason had chosen. I felt immediately out of place in my best button-up shirt and slacks amid the white tablecloths and crystal glasses. Melissa was polite but distant, her smile never quite reaching her eyes when she looked at me. "Vincent, Jason tells me you work in construction," she said, pronouncing the word as if it were foreign. 40 years now," I answered with pride. "Helped build half the shopping centers in this city." "How quaint," she replied, exchanging a look with Jason that I pretended not to notice. As Jason and Melissa's relationship progressed, our father-son time dwindled further. Months would pass with only brief phone calls. When my 60th birthday arrived, I waited for his call, but it never came. 3 days later, he sent a text message. "Sorry about missing your birthday, Dad. Been swamped at work. Rain check on celebration." I replied with a simple, "No problem," swallowing my disappointment. Then came the accident at work. Nothing major, just a fall from a ladder that resulted in a twisted knee and a fractured wrist. But at my age, the recovery was slower than expected. The doctor advised against returning to physical labor, and after a difficult conversation with my boss, I reluctantly agreed to an early retirement. The pension was modest, barely enough to cover rent and utilities, let alone food and medical expenses. For the first time in my adult life, I faced financial uncertainty that I could not work my way out of. After weeks of skipping meals to make ends meet, I finally swallowed my pride and called Jason. "I hate to ask this, son, but I could use some financial advice." I began hesitantly after exchanging pleasantries. The pension is not stretching as far as I had hoped. There was a long pause on the line. How bad is it, Dad? He finally asked, his voice carrying a hint of irritation rather than concern. I explained my situation, each word painful to admit. I had never wanted to be a burden to my son. Another long pause followed. Look, Melissa and I just bought a house with plenty of space, he said eventually. Why do not you come stay with us for a while, at least until you figure things out? Relief washed over me, mixed with gratitude. I would not want to impose. It is fine, he interrupted. Just temporary, okay, until you are back on your feet. I agreed, thanking him profusely. Perhaps I had misjudged the distance between us. Perhaps this would be an opportunity to reconnect with my son and get to know his future wife better. How wrong I was. The house, or rather mansion, that Jason and Melissa had purchased was located in an exclusive gated community. As the taxi drove me up the circular driveway, I gazed in awe at the columned entrance, manicured gardens, and fountain that would not have looked out of place in a European palace. Jason greeted me at the door, his smile tight, as he helped me with my 2 modest suitcases. We have set you up in the guest suite on the first floor, he explained, leading me through a marbled foyer larger than my entire apartment. Thought it would be easier with your knee. The guest suite was bigger than any bedroom I had ever occupied, with an attached bathroom featuring a shower with more buttons and nozzles than I knew what to do with. Everything was pristine, untouched, as if no one had ever stayed there before. This is too much, Jason, I said, genuinely overwhelmed. It is just a guest room, Dad, he replied dismissively. Dinner is at 7. Melissa has a strict schedule for meals. And with that, he left me to settle in. Those first few days, I tried to make myself useful. I woke early making coffee for everyone, though Melissa later informed me that they preferred their specialized machine that I was not to touch. I offered to help with yard work, but was told the landscapers would be disturbed by my interference. Even my attempt to fix a leaky faucet in my bathroom was met with Jason's insistence that the plumber would handle it. Meals were the most uncomfortable part of the day. Melissa would discuss people and places I had never heard of, while Jason talked about work matters that might as well have been in a foreign language. My attempts to join the conversation were met with polite but brief acknowledgments before they continued, as if I was not there. How was your day, Vincent? Melissa would ask, mechanically, barely looking up from her plate. Good, thank you. I walked around the neighborhood, a bit beautiful area, I would reply. She would hum before turning to Jason. So, about the Hamilton account. After 2 weeks, I began to notice Melissa's increasing frustration with my presence. The looks she gave Jason when I entered a room, the way she would suddenly lower her voice during conversations, the exaggerated sighs when I used the kitchen. One evening, as I was returning from my daily walk, I overheard them talking in the study, the door slightly ajar. It has been almost a month, Jason. Melissa's voice was sharp with irritation. When exactly is temporary going to end? What am I supposed to do? Jason replied, sounding equally frustrated. He has nowhere else to go. There are plenty of senior living facilities that would be more appropriate for someone in his situation. You want me to put my father in a home? Jason's voice held a hint of the son I remembered. Do not be dramatic. Those places are very nice these days. Besides, having him here is affecting our lifestyle. The Richardsons already commented on seeing him gardening in worn clothes. What will the neighbors think? There was a long pause before Jason spoke again, his voice resigned. I will look into some options. I quietly retreated to my room, my heart heavier than it had ever been. That night, I lay awake replaying those words over and over. What will the neighbors think? Was my presence really such an embarrassment to them? The next morning, I decided I needed to contribute somehow to be less of a burden. I found a help wanted sign at a small grocery store during my walk and applied on the spot. The manager, an elderly gentleman named Harold, hired me part-time 3 days a week, working the register and stocking shelves. When I shared the news with Jason that evening, hoping he would be pleased by my initiative, his reaction stunned me. "You took a job as a cashier?" he asked incredulously, as if I had announced a decision to become a street performer. "It is honest work," I defended, "and the extra income will help me save for my own place again." "Dad, I am a senior investment manager. How do you think it looks when my father is bagging groceries at the local market?" "I did not realize my work would embarrass you," I replied quietly. "I have never been ashamed of earning an honest living." Jason ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "That is not what I meant. It is just, there are appearances to maintain in this neighborhood in my position." "I see," I said, though in truth I did not. The son I raised had never cared about appearances more than integrity. I kept the job despite Jason's disapproval. It gave me purpose, a reason to get up in the morning, and most importantly, a few hours away from the constant feeling of being unwanted in my son's home. It was during one of my afternoons off that I accidentally discovered something that would change everything. While looking for a book in the home library, I noticed a folder that had fallen behind one of the shelves. Thinking it might be important, I retrieved it, intending to place it on Jason's desk. The label caught my eye: Riverside Development Project. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it to find detailed plans for a luxury condominium development, along with financial projections showing potential returns in the millions. Jason's name was listed as lead investor, along with a personal contribution of $5 million. $5 million. The number struck me like a physical blow. My son had $5 million to invest in a real estate project, while questioning why his father needed to work at a grocery store for minimum wage. I carefully returned the folder to where I had found it and retreated to my room, a new understanding taking root in my mind. The distance between us was no longer just emotional or social. There was now a financial gulf so vast that I could never hope to bridge it, not even if I worked another lifetime. The evening that everything came to a head began like any other in that house of tension and unspoken resentments. I had the day off from the grocery store and decided to prepare dinner for everyone, a peace offering of sorts. I spent the afternoon making my special lasagna. Sarah's recipe, the same one that used to make Jason's eyes light up when he was a boy. The kitchen was not my domain in this house, but I navigated it carefully, making sure to clean as I went. I set the table with the expensive dinnerware, arranged flowers in the center, and even opened a bottle of red wine to breathe, as I had seen Melissa do on occasion. At precisely 7 o'clock, Melissa entered the dining room, her eyebrows raising slightly at the sight. "Vincent, what is all this?" she asked, her tone somewhere between surprise and disapproval. "Just thought I would make dinner tonight," I replied with a smile. "Give your chef the night off." "We do not have a chef," she corrected coldly. "We have a meal delivery service that Jason specifically selected for its nutritional balance." Before I could respond, the front door slammed and Jason stormed into the dining room. His face flushed with anger, still wearing his expensive suit, though his tie was loosened. "Everything okay, son?" I asked cautiously. He ignored my question, pouring himself a generous glass of whiskey from the bar cart. "The Riverside deal is delayed again. Zoning Commission wants more environmental studies." He downed half the glass in one swallow. "Another 6 months minimum." Melissa moved to his side, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "We knew there might be complications, darling. It is still a solid investment. I stood awkwardly by the table, unsure if I should mention dinner or give them privacy. Finally, I cleared my throat gently. I made lasagna. Your mother's recipe. Might help take your mind off things. Jason turned as if noticing me for the first time. His eyes moved from me to the set table, something unreadable crossing his face. Fine, he muttered, moving toward his usual seat. As I served the food, I accidentally bumped Jason's arm while placing his plate, causing him to spill some of the wine he had just poured. The red liquid splashed onto his white shirt cuff. "For God's sake," he exclaimed, jumping up. "This shirt is $300. "I am so sorry," I said quickly, grabbing a napkin. "Let me help." He snatched the napkin from my hand. "You have done enough," he snapped, dabbing at the stain furiously. "It was an accident, Jason," Melissa said, surprising me with what seemed like a defense. "An accident?" Jason laughed bitterly, like it was an accident when he fell off that ladder. Like it was an accident that he has no retirement savings, like it is an accident that he is living in our house eating our food. Each word hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen, the serving spoon still in my hand. "Jason," Melissa warned, glancing at me uncomfortably. But he was too far gone, the dam of resentment finally breaking. "Do you have any idea what it is like working 60-hour weeks while my father plays gardener and grocery bagger? Do you know what my colleagues would say if they knew?" "Son, I think you need to calm down," I said quietly, finding my voice at last. He whirled on me, eyes blazing. "Do not tell me to calm down, not in my house." "I never meant to be a burden," I started. "But you are," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. "You always have been. All those years of sacrificing for me, you made sure I knew. It felt it, carried it." I shook my head, genuinely confused. "I never—" "Stop living off me!" he screamed, his face contorted with rage. "I have been carrying you my whole life. First emotionally, with your constant reminders of how hard you worked for me, and now financially, when does it end?" The room fell silent, except for Jason's heavy breathing. Melissa stood motionless, eyes fixed on her plate. And I felt something inside me break, a final thread severing. With deliberate calm, I placed the serving spoon on the table. Without a word, I walked to my room, closed the door softly behind me, and began to pack my few belongings. My hands were steady, though my heart raced painfully in my chest. As I folded each shirt, each pair of socks, memories flooded my mind. Jason's 5th birthday, when I had saved for months to buy him the bicycle he wanted. His high school graduation, the pride in his eyes when he looked at me from the stage. The day I handed him the keys to his college apartment, purchased with the money from our family home. I had carried him, yes. Carried him in my arms as a child, on my shoulders as a boy, and in my heart always. Not once had it felt like a burden. When my bag was packed, I took one last look around the guest room that had never felt like mine. I wrote a brief note, leaving it on the perfectly made bed. It said simply, "I love you. Always have always will." I walked through the silent house, past the dining room where my lasagna sat cooling on the table. Neither Jason nor Melissa was anywhere to be seen. At the front door, I paused, half hoping my son would appear, apologize, ask me to stay. He did not. The heavy door closed behind me with a soft click, and I stepped into the warm evening air alone. I was 62 years old, with a small suitcase, a few $100s to my name, and nowhere to go. But as I walked down the long driveway away from my son's mansion, I felt something unexpected relief. The weight of trying to belong where I clearly did not was lifted from my shoulders. I checked into a modest motel that night, sitting on the edge of the bed in the dark, truly alone for the first time in decades. And there, in that anonymous room with its worn carpet and humming air conditioner, I allowed myself to weep. Not just for the cruel words spoken that evening, but for the slow, painful death of the relationship I had treasured above all else. The morning after I left Jason's house, I awoke with a sense of emptiness that quickly gave way to an urgent question: what now? At 62, with limited savings and a body that could no longer handle physical labor, my options seemed scarce. But I had faced difficult odds before, and giving up was not in my nature. I checked out of the motel after 2 nights, knowing I needed to stretch my money as far as possible. On my 3rd day of independence, as I was having a cup of coffee at a small diner and scanning apartment listings I could not afford, a booming voice called my name. Vincent Marshall, is that you?" I looked up to see a large man with a gray beard approaching my table, his weathered face breaking into a wide smile. "Frank O'Malley," I said, recognition dawning. It has been, 15 years? Frank had been a fellow carpenter on several job sites before he started his own contracting business. We had been good friends once before the life and distance pulled us in different directions. "Too long," he agreed, sliding into the booth across from me uninvited, but entirely welcome. "What are you doing in this part of town? Last I heard you were living with that hotshot son of yours." Perhaps it was the genuine concern in his eyes, or simply the relief of seeing a familiar face, but I found myself telling Frank everything. The accident, my early retirement moving in with Jason, and finally the painful confrontation that led to my current homeless state. Frank listened without interruption, his expression darkening as the story unfolded. When I finished, he shook his head slowly. "That is not the boy I remember," he said gruffly. "You brought him to the sites sometimes during summer breaks. Polite kid, always asking questions about the work." "People change," I replied, staring into my cooling coffee. "Well, screw him," Frank said with sudden vehemence. "You do not need that kind of treatment, Vince. Not from anyone, especially not your own blood." His loyalty warmed something inside me that had grown cold. "Thing is," I admitted, "I do need a place to stay and work that will not kill my knee. Not many options for an old carpenter." Frank leaned back, studying me thoughtfully. "Actually, I might know something. Friend of mine, Thomas, runs a coffee shop downtown. Manager just quit on him, and he is looking for someone responsible. Pay is decent, and there is an apartment above the shop that comes with the job." Hope, that fragile emotion I had almost forgotten, flickered to life. "You think he would consider me? I do not have experience in food service." "You ran work crews for decades, kept schedules, ordered supplies, handled client complaints," Frank countered. "That is management experience. Besides, Thomas trusts my judgment. Let me make a call." 2 hours later, I was shaking hands with Thomas Chen, a soft-spoken man in his 50s who owned the Morning Roast, a cozy coffee shop in a gentrifying neighborhood. The interview was brief, more of a conversation than a formal assessment. By the end of the day, I had a job and a small but clean studio apartment above the shop. "Previous manager left it a mess," Thomas apologized as he showed me the space. "Take a few days to make it your own before you start downstairs." The apartment was basic, with a kitchenette, a bathroom with a shower stall, and a main room that would serve as both bedroom and living area. But it had large windows that let in plenty of light, and most importantly, it was mine. I spent the next 3 days cleaning, organizing, and familiarizing myself with my new home. On the 4th day, I began my training at the coffee shop, learning the register system, inventory procedures, and the basics of coffee preparation. The work was not physically demanding, a welcome change from construction, and I found I enjoyed the interactions with regular customers. Within a few weeks, I had settled into a comfortable routine. I would open the shop at 6 in the morning, handle the morning rush, with the help of 2 baristas, manage inventory, and ordering during the midday lull, and close at 6 in the evening. My Sundays were free, which I spent exploring my new neighborhood. It was on one such Sunday that I met Dorothy Williams, a retired literature professor, who lived in the apartment building next door. She was struggling with several heavy grocery bags, and I offered to help carry them to her third-floor apartment. "Most young people would not even notice an old lady in distress," she remarked as I placed the bags on her kitchen counter. "What is your excuse?" I laughed, charmed by her directness. "I am hardly young, ma'am. 62 last birthday." "A spring chicken," she scoffed, though her eyes twinkled. She was 70, as I would later learn, with silver hair cut in a stylish bob and the energetic demeanor of someone decades younger. "And call me Dorothy. Ma'am makes me feel ancient." She insisted on thanking me with tea, and what was meant to be a brief visit stretched into hours of conversation. Dorothy was widowed, had taught at the university for 40 years, and had a sharp wit and refreshing honesty I found instantly appealing. By the time I left her apartment, we had made plans to visit the farmers market together the following Sunday. As the weeks turned to months, my life took on new dimensions. The coffee shop flourished under my management, with Thomas often commenting on the increasing regular customer base. My friendship with Dorothy deepened, our Sunday outings becoming the highlight of my week. And most surprisingly, I rediscovered an old passion. In the small storage room behind the coffee shop, I found an abandoned workbench. With Thomas's permission, I set up a modest woodworking space using tools I gradually purchased from secondhand stores. In the evenings after the shop closed, I would lose myself for hours in the familiar comfort of working with my hands, creating small items, trinket boxes, coasters, cutting boards, pieces that reminded me of simpler times. One day, Thomas noticed a jewelry box I had made from reclaimed oak. "This is beautiful work, Vincent," he said, examining the dovetail joints and hand-carved lid. "You should sell these." "Oh, it is just a hobby," I demurred. But Thomas was insistent. "We have that empty display case by the register. Let me put a few pieces out, see what happens." To my surprise, the items sold quickly. Customers were drawn to the craftsmanship, the unique character of each piece. Soon I was receiving custom orders, requests for specific designs. Thomas suggested we split the profits, but the arrangement felt unfair given that I was using his space. "How about this?" I proposed. "Let us create a small section of the shop for local artisans. I will manage it, curate the items, and we will split the commission on all sales, not just mine." Thomas agreed enthusiastically, and within a month, the Craftsman's Corner was born, featuring my woodwork, alongside pottery, jewelry, and textiles from other local artists. The coffee shop took on a new identity, becoming something of a community hub. Through all these positive changes, one constant remained: silence from Jason. No calls, no texts, no attempt to find out where I was or if I was all right. I had not reached out either, recognizing that we both needed space to process what had happened. But as the months passed, the silence grew heavier, more definitive. 8 months after I had walked out of his house, I received an elegant envelope in the mail. Inside was an invitation to the engagement party of Jason Marshall and Melissa Huntington. No personal note, no acknowledgement of our estrangement, just a formal invitation, as if I were any other acquaintance. I stood in my apartment holding the heavy cardstock, a storm of emotions swirling within me. Anger at the impersonal nature of the gesture. Hurt that this was how he chose to reconnect. A strange sense of loss, as if receiving definitive proof that the son I had raised was truly gone. Yet beneath it all, a stubborn flicker of love remained. Despite everything, he was still my son, the boy I had raised alone, the center of my world for so many years. "Are you going to go?" Dorothy asked when I showed her the invitation over dinner at her apartment. I do not know, I admitted. Part of me wants to see him to try to understand what happened to us. Another part thinks it might be better to let go. She covered my hand with hers, her touch warm and comforting. Whatever you decide, remember that you have built a good life here, Vincent. You have value, purpose, people who care about you. That does not change regardless of what happens with Jason. Her words stayed with me as I considered my options. And after much reflection, I made my decision. I would attend the engagement party not as a supplicant seeking reconciliation, but as a man who had reclaimed his dignity and rebuilt his life. The choice was made. Now I just had to find the strength to face my son again. The Huntington estate where the engagement party was held was even more impressive than Jason's home, a sprawling mansion set on manicured grounds with formal gardens and a view of the city skyline. As the taxi dropped me off at the entrance, I straightened my tie, a moment of self-consciousness washing over me. My suit, while clean and well-maintained, was several years old, a stark contrast to the designer attire I knew would be the norm inside. I had not RSVP'd to the invitation, a small act of rebellion, or perhaps self-protection. Now standing before the imposing front doors, I almost turned back. But I had come this far, and running away had never been my style. The butler who answered the door looked momentarily puzzled at my lack of invitation, but directed me to the grand ballroom when I gave my name. "Ah, Mr. Marshall, the father of the groom-to-be." He said, his expression neutral, but his tone carrying a hint of recognition that told me Jason had likely discussed me with the staff, and not in flattering terms. The ballroom was filled with at least 100 guests, all dressed impeccably, mingling in small groups with champagne flutes in hand. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the scene while a string quartet played softly in one corner. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and stood for a moment scanning the crowd for my son. I spotted him near the center of the room, Melissa at his side, greeting guests with practiced smiles. He looked good, healthy, successful in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. But there was something in his expression, a tightness around his eyes, that suggested the smile was more performance than genuine joy. Taking a deep breath, I made my way toward them, weaving through clusters of guests. A few curious glances followed me, perhaps wondering who this ordinary-looking older man was among the obviously wealthy crowd. Jason saw me when I was about 10 feet away. His smile froze, eyes widening in genuine shock. He whispered something to Melissa, whose head snapped in my direction, her expression shifting from surprise to poorly concealed dismay. "Dad," Jason said, as I reached them, the words sounding strange on his lips after so many months of silence. "I did not know you were coming." "Hello, son," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Melissa, congratulations to you both." An awkward silence stretched between us before Melissa recovered her social graces. "Thank you for coming, Vincent. If you will excuse me, I need to check on something with the caterer." She squeezed Jason's arm before gliding away, leaving us alone in a room full of people. "You look well," Jason said stiffly, his eyes assessing me. "I was not sure, after you left, if I was still alive," I finished for him, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from my voice. "Yes, I managed to survive without your help." He had the grace to look ashamed. "That is not what I meant." He glanced around, clearly uncomfortable having this conversation surrounded by guests. "Let us talk somewhere private." I followed him through a set of French doors onto a terrace overlooking the gardens. The night air was cool, the sounds of the party muffled once the doors closed behind us. For a long moment, we stood in silence looking out at the carefully tended landscape, illuminated by strategic lighting. "Why did you come?" Jason finally asked. "You are my son," I said simply. "Despite everything, that has not changed. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache for the boy he once was. "Look, Dad, about what happened. I said things I should not have. I was under a lot of pressure with the Riverside project stalling, and I was an easy target," I finished for him. "The embarrassing father who did not fit into your new life." "That is not fair," he protested weakly. "Is it not?" I turned to face him fully. "Tell me, Jason. When did it change? When did you start seeing me as a burden rather than your father? Was it when I sold our home to pay for your education? When I moved into your guest room because I could not afford to live on my own? Or was it always there, this resentment just waiting for the right moment to surface?" He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "It was not like that." "Then what was it like?" I pressed. "Help me understand how my son, who I gave everything for, could scream at me to stop living off him." Jason's shoulders slumped, the perfect posture of the successful businessman, giving way to something more vulnerable. "I do not know," he admitted quietly. "Sometimes I do not recognize myself anymore, Dad. This life, these people, the constant pressure to have more, be more. It changes you." For the first time that evening, I saw a glimpse of the son I remembered. Not the polished finance executive, but the boy who had once told me his dreams over spaghetti dinners. "It only changes you if you let it," I said, my tone softening. "You always have a choice about who you want to be." He looked at me, then really looked at me, perhaps seeing beyond his preconceptions for the first time in years. "You seem different. More, I do not know, confident." I nodded. "Losing everything can do that to you. It strips away the non-essentials, makes you realize what truly matters." "Where are you living now?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "I manage a coffee shop downtown. The Morning Roast. I have an apartment above it." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "A coffee shop, Dad, if you needed money." "I do not," I interrupted firmly. "I am doing fine on my own. Better than fine, actually. I have rediscovered my woodworking. We sell my pieces in the shop, and I am even taking custom orders now." "Woodworking." A small, genuine smile appeared on his face. "Like the ornaments we used to make at Christmas." The shared memory hung between us, a fragile bridge across the chasm that had opened in our relationship. "Yes," I said softly, "though a bit more sophisticated these days." Another silence fell, less tense than before, but still heavy with unspoken words and emotions. "I should get back to the party," Jason finally said. "Melissa's parents are expecting us to make a toast soon." I nodded, understanding that whatever reconciliation might be possible would not happen in one conversation. "Before you go," I said, reaching into my jacket pocket, "there is something I want you to know." I handed him a sealed envelope, my name and the law firm's letterhead visible in the corner. "What is this?" he asked, taking it reluctantly. "My updated will," I replied calmly. "I had it drawn up last month." He stared at the envelope as if it might bite him. "Dad, I do not want your money. If that is what this is about—" "Open it," I said. "Not now, but later when you are alone. I think you should know where things stand." He slipped the envelope into his pocket, looking uncomfortable. "We should go inside." As we turned to re-enter the ballroom, I placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. "I want you to know something, Jason. I have never regretted a single sacrifice I made for you. Not one. Even now. But I have learned that sacrificing your dignity is never required, not even for those you love most." His eyes met mine, a complex mix of emotions swimming in their depths. For a moment I thought he might say more, might reach for the deeper conversation we needed to have. Instead, he nodded once and opened the door. the sounds of the party washing over us as we stepped back into his world, a world where I was still an outsider. I stayed only long enough to witness the toast watching from the periphery, as Jason and Melissa smiled for their guests, the perfect couple with the perfect future ahead of them. Then I slipped away quietly, the taxi I had called waiting at the circular drive. As we pulled away from the Huntington estate, I felt a curious sense of peace. I had faced my son, spoken my truth, and maintained my dignity. The rest was up to him. 2 years can change a life completely. Mine certainly transformed in ways I never imagined possible on that painful night I left Jason's house. The morning roast had evolved from a neighborhood coffee shop into a thriving community space. My craftsman's corner had expanded to take over the adjoining storefront, when it became vacant now featuring work from over 20 local artisans. Thomas and I had become partners in the business, his coffee expertise complementing my management skills and woodworking connections. My own creations had gained something of a following, with customers commissioning pieces months in advance. What had begun as therapy, a way to reconnect with happier times, had blossomed into a genuine second career. At 64, I found myself busier and more fulfilled than I had been in decades. My personal life had flourished as well. Dorothy and I had moved beyond friendship, our Sunday outings gradually extending to dinners, theater nights, and eventually to sharing our lives. She had moved into my apartment 6 months ago, bringing her books, her cat, and her remarkable capacity for joy into my daily existence. As for Jason, the silence had continued after the engagement party. I knew from local news that he and Melissa had married in a lavish ceremony and that the Riverside development project had finally broken ground. But we had no direct contact, the gulf between us apparently too wide to bridge. Until one ordinary Tuesday morning in April. I was at my workbench in the back of the craftsman shop, putting the finishing touches on a custom jewelry box for a client's anniversary gift, when Amber, one of our sales associates, appeared in the doorway. "Vincent, there is someone here to see you," she said, an odd note in her voice. I looked up, pushing my glasses back up my nose. "A customer, can you help them? I am just finishing this piece for the Johnsons." "It is not a customer," she replied. "It is, well, he says he is your son." My hands stilled on the fine sandpaper I had been using. "Jason is here," she nodded, looking uncertain. "Should I tell him you are busy?" "No," I said, setting aside my tools and removing my work apron. "Tell him I will be right out." My heart pounded as I washed my hands in the small sink, thoughts racing. Why now? After 2 years, what could have prompted this unexpected visit? I stepped into the main shop area and saw him immediately standing awkwardly by the display of wooden bowls, dressed in business casual attire that still probably cost more than most people's formal wear. He looked thinner than at the engagement party, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "Jason," I said as I approached. He turned a tentative smile, lifting the corners of his mouth. "Dad, this place is amazing." "Thank you," I replied, still trying to process his presence. "Would you like some coffee? We make a pretty decent cup." "Sure," he agreed quickly, seeming relieved at the simple suggestion. I led him to a quiet corner table and signaled to Amber for 2 coffees. We sat in silence until she brought them along with a plate of the chocolate almond biscotti that was our signature item. "So," I began after taking a sip, "this is a surprise." Jason cradled his mug in both hands, staring into the dark liquid as if it might contain the words he was struggling to find. "I read the will," he finally said. "The one you gave me at the engagement party. I read it that night, actually." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "The scholarship fund in Mom's name," he said softly. "That was a beautiful idea." "She always valued education," I replied. Seemed fitting to help others the way we tried to help you. He flinched slightly at the we, perhaps remembering how young he had been when she died, how little time they had had together. And the money for Dorothy? She must be special. She is, I confirmed. You would like her, I think. She teaches literature like your mother did, has the same passion for books. Jason nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. The thing is, Dad, the conditions you put on my inheritance. There it was. The real reason for his visit. In my updated will, I had left the bulk of my modest estate, including my partnership in the business and my woodworking equipment, to be divided between the scholarship fund and Dorothy. Jason was to receive a small monetary sum, with one condition he would need to complete 100 hours of community service at the downtown homeless shelter before receiving it. The 100 hours at the shelter, I acknowledged. Did that upset you? At first, yes, he admitted. I thought it was your way of punishing me, making some point about how I treated you. That was not my intention, I said honestly, though I can see why you might think that. I know that now, he said, meeting my eyes directly, because I have already completed 78 hours. Of all the things I had imagined he might say, this was not among them. You have been volunteering at the shelter. He nodded, a hint of pride in his expression. Every Saturday for the past 3 months, started right after Melissa left me. The news hit me like a physical blow. Melissa left Jason, I had no idea. He gave a humorless laugh. Turns out, investment bankers are only attractive spouses when the investments are succeeding. The Riverside project went underwater when the market shifted. I lost almost everything. I am so sorry, I said, meaning it. Whatever had transpired between us, I never wanted to see my son in pain. He shrugged. Do not be. It was a wake-up call, the kind I apparently needed. And the shelter, I prompted gently. I went initially because I was angry. Wanted to get the hours done, claim what was mine, prove something to you. He broke off a piece of biscotti, examining it rather than eating it. But something happened around week 3. This guy came in my age roughly with his kid. Lost his job, then his apartment. The look in his eyes, Dad, it was fear, but also this fierce determination to protect his child, to somehow make things right. Jason paused, swallowing hard before continuing. And suddenly, all I could think about was you. How many times you must have felt that same fear raising me alone, how hard you must have worked to never let me see it. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I remained silent, sensing he needed to finish. I kept going back, not for the inheritance, but because it felt like, I do not know, penance maybe, or just something real in a life that had become so artificial, I did not recognize myself anymore. He finally looked up at me. I am not the man I want to be yet, Dad. But I am trying to find my way back. Back to what? I asked softly. To being someone you could be proud of. He replied, his voice barely audible. Someone worthy of being your son. The words hung in the air between us, fragile and precious. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his, just as Dorothy had done for me when I showed her Jason's invitation. You never stopped being my son, I told him. Not for a single moment. His other hand came up to cover mine, and for a brief time we sat in silence, the simple human connection, saying more than words could. Eventually, Jason cleared his throat, composing himself. So, woodworking, huh? These are really incredible pieces. He gestured toward the display cases. Would you like to see the workshop? I offered. His face brightened. I would love that. As I showed him around the space, explaining my techniques and current projects, I was reminded of teaching him to use tools as a boy, his eager questions and careful attention. "Remember those birdhouses we used to make?" he asked, running a hand along the edge of my workbench. "Every spring," I confirmed, smiling at the memory. "You were always more interested in the painting than the construction." "Because you made the construction look so easy," he replied. I never appreciated how much skill it actually took. Before he left that day, we made plans for him to return on Sunday to join Dorothy and me for dinner. It was a small step, but a significant one. The road to healing our relationship would be long and likely not without setbacks, but for the first time in years, it felt possible. Over the following months, Jason became a regular presence in our lives. He completed his hours at the shelter, but continued volunteering, finding meaning in the work that had been lacking in his finance career. He started taking woodworking lessons from me on weekends, his early attempts charmingly imperfect but improving with practice. When a position opened up for a financial manager at a local nonprofit that provided job training for disadvantaged youth, I encouraged him to apply. The salary was a fraction of what he had earned in his previous life, but the day he called to tell me he had gotten the job, his voice contained a happiness I had not heard since he was a child. 6 months after his first visit to the shop, I updated my will again. The scholarship fund remained, as did the provision for Dorothy. But Jason's inheritance now included my original woodworking tools, the ones I had used to teach him as a boy, with no conditions attached. Life is strange in its circular nature. I had spent decades carrying my son first literally in my arms, then figuratively through sacrifice and hard work. When he rejected that support, claiming I was the one living off him, the pain had nearly broken me. Yet that breaking had been necessary, forcing me to rebuild myself, to rediscover my own worth, separate from my identity as a father. And in doing so, I had somehow created the space for Jason to find his way back, not as the entitled man who had shouted at me in his mansion, but as something closer to the boy I had raised, the man I had always hoped he would become. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to recognize what truly matters. I do not regret rewriting my will that day, even knowing the pain that would follow. It was not about punishing Jason or teaching him a lesson. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my right to be valued for who I was, not just what I had given. In the end, that act of self-respect did more to heal us both than any amount of silent suffering or martyrdom could have achieved. What do you think is standing up for your own dignity worth the risk of losing relationships? Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved in order to find yourself again? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more. Life stories. Remember, sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Thank you for joining me today.